Not from a distance, from somewhere much deeper, and admiration began turning into something else, longing, not the desperate kind, the quiet kind, the kind that appears when someone realizes they may have lost access to a person who mattered more than they understood. They began wondering what you are doing now, whether you are happy, whether you still think about them, whether you ever mention them, whether their name still means something to you, whether you have forgiven them. And then they asked the question that made their heart stop: what if they have already moved on? That possibility terrified them, because now they understood something. They could no longer assume you would always be there. You had changed, your life had continued, you had survived the absence, and perhaps you had learned how to live without them. That is when urgency entered their heart, not because they suddenly became entitled to your attention, but because they realized that time does not stand still for unfinished love. People grow, paths change, doors close, and sometimes the person you thought would wait forever eventually chooses peace. Your soulmate is beginning to understand this, and that. Understanding is creating movement. They have started thinking about reaching out, but they are not sure how, because how do you approach someone after realizing you misunderstood a part of their life? How do you say, "I know now"? How do you admit that something you once believed about them was wrong? How do you ask for another chance without pretending the past did not happen? These questions have been circling through their mind, and there is one particular sentence they keep imagining saying to you. It is simple, but it carries the weight of everything they never understood. "I wish I had known." That sentence contains regret, because if they had known, perhaps they would have treated you differently, perhaps they would have stayed, perhaps they would have asked better questions, perhaps they would have listened instead of assuming, perhaps they would have realized that the person they thought was pulling away was actually trying to survive something invisible. And my beloved child, this is why the discovery matters, not because it magically guarantees a reunion, not because every soulmate story ends with two people together, but because truth changes the choices people make. Your soulmate now has information they did not have before, and information creates responsibility. They can no longer unknow what they know. They can no longer return completely to the old story. Something has shifted, but there is another secret inside this discovery, something your soulmate learned about you that they were even less prepared for. They discovered that during the time they believed you had forgotten them, you had actually spoken about them. Not publicly, not dramatically, not in the way they might imagine, but someone heard you say something simple, something honest, something you probably assumed would never reach them. You said their name, and what you said after their name is what shook them, because you did not speak with anger, you did not speak with hatred, you did not speak as though they were meaningless, you spoke with tenderness. You admitted that a part of you still hoped they were okay. That was the detail your soulmate could not forget. They had believed you hated them. They had believed you were completely finished. They had believed your silence meant you wanted them gone. And then they discovered that even after everything, you had still cared about their well-being. That broke something open inside them, because suddenly, the story they had been telling themselves collapsed. They had been protecting their ego with the belief that you did not care. Now they knew you did. and that made their own choices harder to defend. They began wondering whether they had mistaken your strength for coldness, whether they had mistaken your independence for lack of love, whether they had mistaken your boundaries for rejection. And perhaps the most painful realization was this: you may have loved them without chasing them, you may have cared without begging, you may have missed them without abandoning yourself. That kind of love is difficult to forget, because it does not demand, it simply exists. And now they are standing face to face with the possibility that they walked away from someone who loved them more sincerely than they understood. My beloved child, there is something you must remember as this story unfolds. You are not responsible for making your soulmate understand. You are not responsible for explaining every wound. You are not responsible for proving that your feelings were real. If someone truly wants to know your heart, they must approach you with humility. They must ask. They must listen. They must be willing to discover the parts of your story they once misunderstood. You do not have to chase them into understanding. Let them come toward truth. And they are coming closer, not physically yet, emotionally, internally. The wall they built around the memory of you is weakening. The certainty they once had is disappearing. The questions are becoming louder. And there is one question they cannot escape anymore. What if I still have a chance? That question has changed their behavior. They have started looking at the possibility of contacting you differently. Before, they thought about it and immediately found a reason not to. Now, they think about it and wonder what might happen if they never do. That is a completely different kind of fear. The fear of rejection is painful, but the fear of permanent regret can be stronger. They are beginning to understand that there may come a day when it is too late to say what should have been said, and that thought is becoming unbearable. So they are considering taking a risk, a real one, not a vague signal, not a hidden social media post, not an indirect message through someone else. A real attempt to reach you. But before they do, something else must happen. They need to know whether the person who told them this hidden truth was telling the entire story, because there is one detail that was left out, one piece that nobody mentioned, and when your soulmate discovered that there was still more to the story, they became determined to find it. They started asking questions, quietly, carefully. They did not want you to know. They did not want anyone to realize how deeply the discovery had affected them. But the more they searched, the stranger it became. Every answer led to another question. Every explanation revealed another missing piece. And then they found something. Something connected to a time in your life when you thought nobody was watching, something you had kept completely private, something that proves your soulmate was never seeing the full picture. When they discovered it, they went completely silent, because suddenly, the person they thought they knew was standing before them in an entirely different light. And what they discovered next was not merely about your past, it was about what you had been doing all along. While they were convinced you had forgotten them, they found evidence that you had made a decision involving them, a decision you never told them about, and now they know. But they also discovered something else. The decision was made at a time when you believed they would never come back. And that means your soulmate is now facing a truth they never expected. If they reach for you now, They may have to confront the consequence of a choice you made long ago, a choice that could change everything. And my beloved child, they have just discovered what that choice was. But what they do not know yet is that you made that decision for a reason, and when the reason finally reaches them, it will force them to choose between protecting their pride and finally telling you the truth they have been hiding from you all this time. Pause here for a moment, because what you are about to hear is not a message you were supposed to find casually. Something was uncovered, something that was never meant to reach the person whose heart is connected to yours, and somehow, accidentally, unexpectedly, your soulmate discovered it. They were not searching for this information. They were not prepared for it. In fact, when they first heard what was said about you, they almost dismissed it. Almost. But then they heard one detail, one sentence, one truth that made them stop breathing for a moment, and suddenly, everything they thought they knew about you began to change, my beloved child. Listen carefully, do not rush past this, because there are moments when heaven allows a hidden truth to surface, not to create fear, but to reveal what has been concealed beneath misunderstanding. You have spent too long wondering why someone pulled away, why they became distant, why their behavior changed, why they sometimes seemed to care deeply and then suddenly acted as though you meant nothing. You may have blamed yourself. You may have replayed conversations. You may have wondered whether you said too much, expected too much, loved too deeply, or somehow became difficult to understand. But there is something you did not know. They were missing a piece of information. A piece of your story, and recently, that missing piece fell into their hands, not through you, not because you told them, not because you sat down and explained everything. They discovered it accidentally, and the moment they did, their entire perception of you shifted. You see, my child, there are things people assume about you because they only see the version of you that you allow the world to see. They see your strength. They see the smile. They see the way you continue moving forward. They see you handling responsibilities. They see you helping others. They see you appearing calm when everything around you feels uncertain. But they do not see the private battles. They do not know how many times you had to rebuild yourself silently. They do not know what you survived without announcing it. They do not know how many nights you questioned whether your heart would ever feel safe again, and your soulmate did not know either, until now. That is why their reaction has been so intense. Because what they discovered was not simply a fact, it was an explanation. An explanation for things they misunderstood about you, an explanation for why you sometimes withdrew, why you became quiet, why you hesitated to trust, why you could love deeply and still protect yourself. Why you sometimes seemed emotionally distant even when your heart was burning with feelings. They thought they understood you. They did not, and the truth they accidentally discovered forced them to revisit memories they had already placed in the past. Suddenly, old conversations sounded different, old silences looked different, old arguments carried a different meaning. Even the moments when they thought you were rejecting them began to look different. They started asking themselves a question that they had never seriously considered before: what if I misunderstood them? And that question opened a door. Behind that door was something they were not prepared to see: regret. my beloved child, there is a particular memory they have been thinking about, a moment when you needed them. You may remember it differently. Perhaps you thought they simply did not care. Perhaps you believed they were emotionally unavailable. Perhaps you told yourself that if they truly loved you, they would have noticed. But after discovering this hidden truth about you, they looked back at that moment and realized something painful. You had been trying to protect yourself. You were not rejecting them. You were afraid. And they had mistaken your fear for indifference. That realization has been sitting heavily inside them, because now they understand that there were moments when you were silently asking to be understood without knowing how to ask, and they walked away. They did not know what was happening inside you. Now they know, or at least they know enough to realize that they never knew the whole story. That realization changes people. It makes them question their own certainty. It makes them revisit decisions they once considered final. And your soulmate has been revisiting decisions. One by one, quietly, privately, they have been asking themselves why they believed the version of the story they were given. Who told them that you did not care? Who convinced them that you had moved on? Who made them believe you were stronger than you actually felt? Who allowed them to walk away without knowing what was happening behind your silence? And then they discovered something even more surprising. Someone had known. Someone had information about you. Someone knew a part of your story that your soulmate never knew, and somehow, that information finally reached them. This is where things become strange, because the person who revealed it may not have intended to reveal anything at all. It may have slipped out during an ordinary conversation, a casual mention, a passing comment, a memory, a name. Something so small that nobody initially recognized its importance, but your soulmate noticed. They heard something that did not fit the story they had believed, so they asked another question, and then another, and suddenly, the conversation became deeper, details began connecting. Pieces began falling into place. And your soulmate realized that there was an entire chapter of your life they had never known existed. That was the moment their heart changed, because they realized that while they were judging your behavior, you may have been carrying something they could never see. And my beloved child, I want you to understand what happened inside them next. They became quiet, not because they stopped caring. Because they were overwhelmed. There are moments when a truth arrives so unexpectedly that the heart needs time to catch up with the mind. They remembered your face, your voice, the way you looked at them during difficult conversations, the things you did not say, the things you almost said, and suddenly, all those unfinished moments became painful. They wondered whether they had been too quick to judge, whether they had demanded answers from someone who was struggling to find words, whether they had mistaken your protection for rejection, whether they had walked away precisely when you needed someone to stay. And then came the thought they were most afraid to admit: what if I was wrong about them? My beloved child, this is the part you need to hear with an open heart. You cannot rewrite the past, neither can they, but understanding can transform the meaning of the past. Sometimes a person cannot apologize for something they do not understand. Sometimes they need to discover the missing piece before they can finally see the damage their misunderstanding caused. Your soulmate is beginning to see, and seeing can be painful. Because once the truth becomes clear, excuses become harder to maintain. They can no longer tell themselves that you simply did not care. They can no longer comfortably believe that you were cold. They can no longer pretend that your silence meant you felt nothing. They now know there was more beneath the surface, and this discovery has made them question another thing: whether you ever stopped loving them. That question has been haunting them, because if the hidden truth explains your behavior, then what else did they misunderstand? Could it be that you were waiting for them to understand? Could it be that you were protecting yourself while secretly hoping they would come closer? Could it be that the distance between you was built on two people being afraid at the same time? They have been thinking about this, late at night, during quiet moments, when there is no one around to distract them, and the more they think, the more they remember. They remember the small things, the details they once considered insignificant, the way you remembered something they had forgotten, the way you noticed when their mood changed, the way you listened, the way you made them feel important without demanding anything in return. They had forgotten how rare that was, until they lost it, and now, after discovering the truth about you, those memories feel different. They feel precious. They feel unfinished. They feel like something was interrupted before it had the chance to become what it was meant to become. But there is something even deeper. Your soulmate discovered that someone had been protecting you, not necessarily physically, emotionally. Someone had kept part of your story private because they believed it was yours to tell. They did not betray you. They simply refused to expose something you had chosen not to share. And when your soulmate accidentally learned about it, they realized that your silence had not been emptiness. It had been dignity. You were carrying your own story. You were not begging anyone to understand. You were not asking people to feel sorry for you. You simply kept going. That realization touched something inside them, because they suddenly saw the strength they had overlooked. They saw that your resilience was not evidence that you never suffered. It was evidence that you suffered and still continued. And that changed the way they remembered you. They began to admire you.